If you remember from the beginning of Romans, Paul is writing this letter primarily to strengthen this body of believers, this synagogue in Rome. He says back in chapter 1, he says, "For I long to see you, so I may share with you some spiritual gift to strengthen you." I'm trying to help you through this difficult time, this hardship that you are enduring, even within yourselves, even this division that exists between you. So, why does he need to strengthen this congregation, this synagogue? It's because they've been through a lot. If you go back and look at it, they talk about some of the things. The Jewish people had been kicked out of Rome back in 49 A.D. They were gone for 5 years. The Gentile believers, some of the converts, some of those that weren't required to leave, were trying to keep and hold things together during that time. Then they were allowed back, and this clash of cultures and ways of doing things, and trying to figure out all of their dynamics, was part of it. They've been through a lot, and there's a lot more coming in the days ahead. The whole world and its system is against them. You've got, even within the synagogue, you've got those who are Jewish, but they don't believe in Messiah. That was one of the things that got them kicked out in the first place. There's some internal conflict. Then there's outside, there's the pagans and all of their temples and all of their idolatry, and even the food that they buy, and is this meat that's been contaminated by idols? They've got the Roman government who is cracking down on them and taxing and doing all other types of things. Not to mention the different pressure that might be coming for both Jew and Gentile when they're hearing from family and friends that may oppose them believing in Yeshua and bringing and adopting this way of life. These Gentiles may be hearing criticism, for becoming too Jewish and quitting all of their pagan celebrations. Right? That's why this fellowship needs strength. There are many people who want to basically tear apart this congregation, this synagogue, that want to keep Jew and Gentile apart and not coming together under the banner of Messiah. And that's not even talking about the spiritual forces of darkness that are at work in all of this. Satan, the accuser, that wants to keep them apart and not working together. So they need to be strengthened and brought together, ready to face all of this opposition, ready to endure through this difficult and this hard time. So that's why Paul warns them in chapter 16 about this, to be particularly mindful of those within the assembly who are wanting to cause division and hardship. He says in chapter 16, he says, "I urge you, brothers and sisters, to keep your eyes." And again, that's one of those moments where it's brothers, and he's mostly talking to the leadership there in this synagogue. He says, "To keep your eye on those who are causing divisions and stumbling blocks, contrary to the teaching that you learned." So apparently that was happening. He says, "Turn away from them." He says, "For such people do not serve our Lord the Messiah, but only their own belly, their own desires, their own wants. By their smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the unsuspecting." So basically, with so many enemies on the outside, those on the inside, you don't want to forget about them as well. They can also be dangerous. They can also serve their own interests. They can also be using deception and flattery to their advantage, false teaching that tickles the ears and divides the people of God into you're over here and you're over here, and keeping them separate and distinct. So with such opposition both within and without, this Roman synagogue needed reassurance of their victory, because it's not going to be easy. And that's where we come into Romans chapter 8. Because the reality is, he is asking this question: who will be against us? He's wanting them to learn this lesson. Because remember what he's been saying, what Paul has been saying in this chapter to this congregation, as they are navigating through this world and all the hardships that they are going through and enduring together. He has to talk about this kind of stuff. Because far too many, and I know it still happens for us today, far too many of us think that because we're struggling, because we're suffering, because things aren't going well, or we're having these difficulties and hard times, because we have so much opposition, man, am I on the right side? Or am I on the wrong side of all this? Maybe our side is losing in all of this. Maybe God's not pleased. Maybe we're wondering whether we've made the wrong decision to follow Messiah. If we have the truth, and if we're in the right, why is my life so hard? Are we really loved of God? And so Paul reassures them that all that they're experiencing now is not going to stop the kingdom that he's preparing. In chapter 8, we've looked at this. I consider the sufferings of this present time not worthy to be compared to with the coming glory to be revealed in us, right? And the sufferings of this present time, and the glory to be revealed. We talked about that, how, that glory he's talking about is Messiah returning to establish the throne of David, to rule over all the earth. So, and you'll see all nations submitting to him. It's also the disbursement. It's receiving our inheritance, our allotment in the land, and how even creation itself is restored to that state of innocence, of perfection that it was before the fall. That's that glory that is to be revealed. And how that all led to this in verse 28. We know that all things, and that's including all of those sufferings and all those hardships and difficulties he just mentioned, all the things work together for good, and that good is that glory to be revealed for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. We talked about that word called, and how that definition of called connects to the idea of this banquet, of being invited to this banquet, invited by God to that future time, that future day of appointment, that day of the Lord. That ties back into the eschatology of the Jewish people in their hope in that great messianic banquet when the kingdom is restored to Israel by a Messiah. We looked at Isaiah 25. He says, on this mountain, Adonai Tzavaot, the Lord of hosts, will prepare a lavish banquet for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, of rich food, choice marrow, of aged wine well refined. And how we got a glimpse of that at the wedding feast at Cana, where Yeshua turns the water into wine. We talked about the word purpose, how it's also tied into a banquet of sorts, the table with the bread on it, the showbread, the 12 loaves of bread representing the tribes of Israel. That word prothesis, where it's setting forth this thing, placing it in view, on display, setting the table, so to speak. Referring to that which is right before the holy place, which gave us even that new way of looking at or understanding this verse. So now that we know that all things, even the sufferings of this present time, they work together for the good, for that coming glory, for those who love God and who are invited to the banquet at the table of his presence. If you don't remember any of that, you weren't here last week, let me encourage you to go back and look at that. But we get to these passages where, following this in Romans 8:29 and such, where some of the best interpreters throw out all of this context and get lost talking about things that Paul is unrelated to what Paul is addressing and the issue that he is trying to deal with him. Romans 8:29. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. Can anybody guess what people get most bogged down in from these passages? Anybody want to take a guess at what words that might bog them down the most? Foreknowledge and predestination. Yeah. That makes up the bulk of a lot of our theological conversation these days. Those two words have caused huge amounts of commentaries and books to be written, and they've separated people from each other. Congregations, reformers, generations of people into various factions, affirming the sovereignty of God or trying to deal with the free will of man. They mostly talk about it in terms of that idea of salvation or justification. And it's totally removed from the context of what Paul is talking about. When you look at that word foreknowledge, prognosko, talking about, it's pretty straightforward. To have knowledge beforehand, ahead of time, prior awareness or knowledge of those, those whom God elected to salvation. Right, so it's even right there in how they want to define the words in Strong's. You see this word at work in a very important passage in 1 Peter chapter 1. He says, "You know that you were redeemed from the futile way of life handed down from your ancestors, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood like that of a lamb without defect or spot, the blood of Messiah." And he, talking about Messiah, talking about Yeshua, he was chosen, it says, but the real word, that's that same word there. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. He was foreknown. So Yeshua was foreknown. Now, is it talking about his salvation? No, it's not. People talk about this in terms of the timing, the foreknowledge, knowing ahead of time, particularly in that issue of our salvation. But it's not talking about Yeshua and his salvation, because he doesn't need to be saved. He's the perfect, spotless Lamb of God. So what is this knowledge? If it is what we tend to say it is, how is something about that knowledge going to be revealed? Right? This was revealed in these last times for your sake. How does that relate to that next word about predestined? It's proorizo, which means to predetermine or decide beforehand. And again, God decreeing from eternity to foreordain or appoint. And it's referred to in that idea of deciding beforehand. You're limiting in advance, so you're cutting off certain options. And again, it's talking about, we talk about it so much in terms of the order of things, of which comes first. Right? We want to make it about understanding how these processes and how these things work, especially in regards to salvation. And you ask these kind of questions, maybe you've heard some like them. Did God know beforehand that we would choose to believe, or did he choose beforehand and so then we believe? Right? That clear it up for you? Did he know we were going to choose him and so he chose us, or did he choose us and then so we then chose him? We're trying to figure out, let me know the how of how this works. Let me know the precision and the order of what comes first, what comes next. And again, we're using words without knowing or really referring to the context and the things that Paul is talking about, the setting, the cultural understanding, or what Paul is trying to do in strengthening this people. Theologians are emphasizing their understanding and definition of these words, their issues, and then building whole theologies and systems off of them. Because the reality is, does God know everything from beginning to end? I mean, is that really controversial? Is he the Aleph and the Tav, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end? Yeah, of course he does. And is he in charge, or is he really the one that is setting things in order? Is he the one that is setting things in motion? Is he in control of things? Yeah, that's not really controversial either, is it? That's not a question or an issue that was ever in debate or discussion for them. So we're, in a lot of ways, we are asking the wrong questions and coming to the wrong conclusions. We're getting lost in our own arguments because we're more interested in basically thinly slicing the line and figuring out where everything is. We're more interested in winning the point than necessarily the truth. Because they're making these words about us, really. About you and me. How am I saved? Do I have free will? Am I one of the elect? That's really what it all comes down to. We're making this whole issue about us. And I want to point out that these words, especially here, are not being used in terms of our salvation, and they're not trying to make it, he's not trying to make it about us, or he's not trying to answer the question of how are we saved. Rather than pointing backwards to those kind of times and those kind of moments and trying to give us an exact timeline of the events that have to take place, where Paul is going with all of this is not backwards, it's eschatological. All right, he's pointing towards the future. When he uses the words, the foreknowledge and the predestined, this is a statement about God and his plan and where he is taking this world and us along with him. This is a statement about him. Right? That 1 Peter passage that we were just looking at, it says that God foreknew Yeshua. And again, it had nothing to do with salvation for him. Right? He was chosen before the foundation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. It was about how God, how Adonai, how he knew before the foundation of the world, from before Genesis 1, he knew exactly what was going to happen. Did he know? Did it surprise him? Was he shocked when Adam and Eve took a bite of that fruit and fell in the garden? Was he caught off guard by that? No. He wasn't surprised in the least. He knew that we would fall into sin. He knew that the whole world would be put into bondage to death and decay, and that he also knew that the way to redeem us and restore the world, that true tikkun olam, meant that Yeshua, the Messiah, is going to come. He must come. He must die. He must be raised so that kingdom will be fully revealed. If he doesn't do that, he was foreknown before the foundation of the world to fulfill that role, and you are seeing it in your day. What God knew from the beginning, his plan, is being revealed before their eyes in their generation. So the foreknowledge and predestination is less about us and more about Adonai and what he has for us and our future, that he's got it covered. Everything is moving exactly as he planned and exactly as he intended. It's good. It's in my hands. You don't have to worry about it. You don't need to be afraid or concerned about the outcome, because has the outcome already been decided? Yes. The outcome is already decided. This is a moment for Paul when he's making this argument here in Romans. It's like that experience that Peter had when he was walking out upon the storm, upon the waves. Y'all remember that? When he walked out there? Was the storm irrelevant? Was the storm not dangerous? Could the storm kill him? Yes. What made the difference? He had his eyes fixed on Yeshua, right? And as soon as he took his eyes off of Yeshua, what happened? All of those things, oh boy, this is crazy. What am I doing here? Right? Paul is making that statement. For those he foreknew, he also predestined. He's telling them, you guys are going through a lot of stuff, and it's really hard. But don't get so caught up looking at the wind and the waves and the storm that's going on around you. Don't get so focused on the persecution, the opposition, the hardships, the sufferings, and think that the end is uncertain, that it's in question, or whether what you're going through is worth it. Don't think that the outcome is in doubt, because the glory is going to be revealed. The kingdom is coming. The king will be on his throne. God foreknew all that is happening right then in their day. Is that still true for our day? Does he know everything that's going on right now? Of course he does. And he's already decided where it's going. He's already predestined how it's going to end. The outcome is certain. You see that in another common passage that people bring up in talking about predestination, Ephesians chapter 1. And again, notice it's about God's plan and the confidence that we should have in the destination. Right? Ephesians 1, 9 through 11. He says, he made known to us the mystery of his will. He's revealed this to us in our day, or in that day, in keeping with his good pleasure that he planned in Messiah. Again, he's talking about the plan and the confidence that you and I need to have in the plan and the planner. He says the plan of the fullness of times is to bring all things together in the Messiah, both things in heaven and things on earth, all in him. Verse 9 is how will his will is talking about the plan, his will of how he was going to redeem us. That might have been a mystery in the past, but he has made it known in their day. He's made it known for us even in ours. In verse 10, he says, there's this plan. It's, do you trust the one who has made the plan? Because it's all directing our attention on the Messiah. This world was made for him. Even Jewish commentary makes that point. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 98b, says the rabbis they're discussing the name of the Messiah. What is the Messiah's name? It says Rabbi Yochanan states the entire world was created only for the sake of Messiah. Who knew that Rabbi Yochanan was agreeing with Paul? He is to bring all things together in the Messiah, both things in heaven and on things in earth, all in him. And verse 11 reassures us that we're not riding down a chaotic river with unpredictable and uncontrollable rapids, but rather we're traveling in God's plan on his path to his destination through all of the hills and the valleys, because our arrival is not in question. He says, in him we also were chosen, predestined according to what? His plan. He keeps working out all things according to the purpose of his will. He is the waymaker that we were just singing about a little while ago. He has made the way for all of this to take place. Chosen here is the same word that we looked at a few weeks ago for being chosen, having the lots and the lots being revealed to show and give you your inheritance. It's that same word from Romans 8. according to his plan. It's that same word, prothesis, that we looked at regarding the showbread and the table in the holy place, referring to the messianic banquet in his kingdom. He continues to work everything toward that goal and that end. So it's predestined, it is chosen for that outcome. It's been decided, and it is not in doubt. Do you feel better when you think the outcome is decided and settled? Think about it like this. Tell me, how many of y'all like watching football? Anybody? I used to watch it a lot more than I did. I used to watch it a lot more, but is there a difference in your emotions or in your nervousness? On one hand, if you're watching a live football game, on TV or something, or in person, it doesn't really matter, and it's overtime. Y'all know what overtime is, right? All right, it's overtime. It's 4th and 20. Your team is behind by 2, and you're trying to kick a 70-yard field goal with 1 second left to win. And if you don't get this play, then the game's over and you've lost. How's your emotions in that moment? Are you a little bit worked up and elevated? At least you're nervous, right? Are you afraid? Are you crossing your fingers? Are you questioning, the coach for being such an idiot that they're even in this situation in the first place? Right? Y'all been there? I've been there a lot, sadly, especially as a Cowboys fan. But you're a wreck in that moment. And you're a wreck because you don't know what's about to happen. Contrast that to how you feel if you're watching the exact same play, but it's a replay and you've already heard the final score. Are your emotions any different? I mean, are you as worked up as you would be otherwise? No. Of course not. You already know the outcome. You already know that he kicks the ball and makes a 70-yard field goal, setting a new record to win the game. And you're just like, man, I just got to watch that. I got to see that for myself. Or you already know that he went to kick that thing and he missed so bad that it's embarrassing and the guy will never play again in the NFL, right? You know the outcome, and so you're not nearly as emotionally charged. Right? We got to understand, we're the ones watching the game live. We're the ones, we get all worked up about the stuff that's going on, and he knows the end from the beginning. It's like he's already watched the game. He's already seen it on replay. He knows the end. But here's the other kicker. When you read this, when you know the word, he's also told us the score at the end of the game. Hasn't he? I mean, hasn't he revealed how the game ends and who wins? He's told us that. He has made it perfectly clear that he wins. The game, from our perspective, may look like a nail biter, but really it's a lopsided blowout. Not only does he win convincingly, but everybody on his team wins. And what matters most is whether you're on his team. Who is the Messiah? That's the deciding factor. That's the great thing about this game, is that in the middle of the game, if you want to switch teams, and if you're on the losing team, I'm just gonna move right over onto this sideline, and I know my team's gonna win. You can do that. That's the exciting thing. What matters most is whether you're on his team and how you've answered the question of who is Messiah. All of this talk about foreknowledge and predestination is not so we can figure out all of the elements of the process of salvation. It's to reassure us that the present struggle should not cause us to doubt that future victory. It wants us foreknowledge and predestination is to give us confidence in the end. It's to point us to the truth that God has included us in his plan and his future, that you have a guaranteed seat at the banquet table. It's reserved for you. His foreknowledge, his predestination are more about that future and what he is going to do to get us to that end. And it's less about us, it's more about him. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed into the image of his Son, so that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. You are predestined. And talking about all that other stuff is really the wrong point, because it needs to be more about what does it mean for you? What is it going to do in you that he foreknew you and that he has predestined you? It's what's the purpose? What is this going to accomplish? Well, he says he foreknew, he predestined for what purpose? That you would be conformed to the image of his Son, so that you would be like Messiah, that you would be like Yeshua, for you died with him, and you will also be raised with him and like him in a body that is not subject to sin and death and decay. Isn't that a good thing? Shouldn't we be looking forward to that? That we will be conformed, we will be shaped and molded into the image of his Son. You will walk as Yeshua walked. And when that happens to you, Yeshua is then exalted and glorified. He is then proven, demonstrated to be the firstborn, the team captain, the Hall of Fame quarterback, the author and perfecter of our faith, in other words. The one who inherits the kingdom and takes responsibility for the kingdom and provides for the rest of the family. That's what the firstborn does when the firstborn steps into his place of inheritance. It's his responsibility now. Yeshua will be shown and demonstrated. He will be revealed and proclaimed, proven to be King Messiah. And he is going to come in power and glory and sit on the throne in Jerusalem. That outcome is secure and absolute. He is a kingdom that will not be shaken. That outcome is also good to know, that outcome is not dependent upon you. He includes you, but it's not in any jeopardy because of you. It's not like, oh man, if I fumble the ball, then we're going to lose. Right? Is it going to mess up everything that God is doing and everywhere he's going if I don't get something exactly right? But he knows the end from the beginning. He has a plan and a purpose. Those he predestined, he also called. This is his plan. This is the way that the waymaker has made. Those he predestined, he also called, and those whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. That outcome is secure and absolute. You're not going to mess it up. The other team, with all of their persecution, all of their opposition, all of the suffering that they are causing, even when it seems like they are unbeatable and unstoppable, they are not going to win at any time, under any circumstances. God foreknew and determined the outcome, and that outcome is his kingdom, Messiah on the throne, the restored creation, redeemed humanity, and to that end, he calls. Starting with Abraham, he called Abraham. He called the people of Israel, and he called you. You are right there within that plan of calling. And when he calls and we respond to him, he justifies. He has justified us. He has declared us righteous by our faith, when we heard the good news of the promises, when we heard what Messiah did for us, and we believed, in the Memra, as Abraham did in Genesis 15, in the Targums, when we believed in that future that he has predestined. And even though we can't see it with our eyes right now, even though we're watching the game live, the coming of King Messiah is going to result in our glorification. He also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. Notice that it doesn't even say that. It says, and those he justified, he will also someday glorify. Right? He's not speaking of it in a future tense, in that it hasn't happened yet. In English, it reads more like past tense, doesn't it? Glorified. All of these words in the Greek are all in the same tense. They're the aorist active indicative, which it says denotes a simple, completed action in the past rather than an ongoing process. So, since God is the one who knows the end from the beginning, as far as he is concerned, all of those things are already done. That makes sense? All of them are done. They're not ongoing. They're not in question. They're not uncertain. He's like, man, I hope I can figure it out and get to the right end. He's like, no, I have called you. I have justified you, and I have already glorified you. You don't see it yet, but he does. From God's perspective, it's already done. And that fits nicely with what Paul says in Philippians chapter 1, where he says, I am sure of this very thing, from beginning to end, right? That he who began a good work in you is going to do what? He will carry it on to completion until the day of Messiah Yeshua. Nothing is ever going to get him off track. Nothing is ever going to subvert this direction and this purpose and this goal. God's foreknowledge and predestination and his choosing are to reassure us of this truth. Messiah and the kingdom didn't start with you, but with him. It doesn't depend on you, but you can be included and participate in what he is doing. You can fulfill even a very important role. But as far as he's concerned, Messiah is on the throne in Jerusalem. That's his goal. That's his purpose. And he has already determined the outcome. And so that means that nothing that you see here, that you see on the news, nothing that you hear or read in the articles, nothing that you experience in this world is ever going to change that outcome. No powerful government, no amount of persecution or hardship will overcome or defeat that glory that is to be revealed. And so then Paul asked the obvious question to encourage the synagogue of Rome, because again, they're afraid. They're losing sight of that hope. And so he asked that question, what then shall we say in view of these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He has already determined the outcome of the game. If we are on the team that God has set up with Messiah as our captain, are we going to lose? No. No matter what it looks like. There is nothing in this world, no experiencing that we will have that will alter this course. So we must not lose hope. We must not lose sight of that reality. We must just have to endure to the end. We sang this song a couple of weeks ago. The victory is mine because the battle belongs to who? The battle is yours. The victory is mine because the battle is yours. No weapon formed against me will stand, right? And I know in the midst of my suffering and exile, I can be assured of what he talks about in Jeremiah, the passage that's always so misquoted and misunderstood, that I know he has plans for me when I trust him and his Messiah, plans to prosper me, plans to give me a hope and a future. That's what this is talking about. And if I ever do question, if I wonder, maybe he's not really fully committed to this goal after all. If he was really committed to everything, then maybe it should be going better. Maybe he's not as serious about this as I thought. You ask the question, how committed is God to this outcome? Well, he proves it in the next verse in Romans. If God is for us, who can be against us? This is how committed he is. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how shall he not also with him freely give us all things? How committed is God to this goal and to this end? He is so committed that he is willing to send his one and only Son to endure the death of the cross and the resurrection. That's how committed he is to this goal. Adonai gave his one and only, his firstborn, to the cause of our redemption and the restoration of this world, to the cause of his promise. But what about all these terrible things that are happening? What about all the charges and condemnations from the world, from our family, from the government, the accusations, even convictions for crimes? I mean, there was a pastor in England, I think I mentioned this before, that was sentenced for just preaching a message within like 200, 300 meters of a hospital. He was convicted. The accusations of saying, that we're committing blasphemy or treason or crimes against humanity by insulting all of the other gods that they would have heard there in the city of Rome. He asked the question in verse 33, who shall bring a charge against God's elect? Is what they have to say the one that matters? No. Is their opinion of you the one that you should listen to? No, it is God who justifies. They may accuse, but only God's opinion matters because he has already justified you. He has already declared you righteous by the blood of Messiah. Nothing the world says, no charges or convictions carry more weight than his word. So what about their condemnation? What about the world's opinion? They're saying we're guilty. They're saying that we deserve the judgment and the punishment of all the gods. Does any of that matter? Not at all. Because they don't compare to the Son. And how much judgment has been given to the Son? All judgment, according to John 5. Nobody compares to him. Who is it, the one who condemns? It's not the world. It's not those governments. It's not even those friends and family who may not understand what's happening to you. It is Messiah who died and moreover was raised and is now at the right hand of God and who also intercedes for us. His word matters. All judgment has been given over to Messiah. And so he is either going to justify you or he is going to do what? He's going to condemn you. That's the only verdict that matters. The fact that he has declared you righteous because of your faith in him, that he has justified you and glorified you, exalted you, made your name great, that's all that matters. And so with all the stuff that's going on, there is no need to panic. There is no need to question. Adonai has you in his hands, and no one can take you from his hands. You are at his banquet table, and you have a place reserved for you. No matter what you experience here in this world while we wait for his return, The world can throw the worst of everything at you, and it won't make a difference because he has already decided. So he asks the question, who shall separate us from the love of Messiah? Is any of this stuff going to separate us from him? Shall tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, or the sword? Nothing will separate us. None of that stuff that you're going through, none of that stuff that you're enduring is going to separate you from the love of Messiah. No hardship, accusation, condemnation, or military army can overcome what God has determined to do. None of them can change the outcome that he has decided, he has predetermined, because Scripture never taught, and it's important. Is he saying that now that you believe in Messiah, you will never have any of those experiences? Does he say that? Are there people out there that teach that? Oh man, because if you just have faith, man, nothing's going to go wrong in your life. You'll have all the health and wealth and money, and you'll be successful. You have all that stuff because you believe. No. You can have the strongest of faith, and that's going to bring on even more of that stuff. It's going to bring on the tribulation and the distress and the persecution. Why? Because we're at war with the forces of darkness in this world, and they don't want to see you live with joy. He doesn't want to see us come together as God's people. None of these things will separate us from the love of Messiah, and Scripture never taught us that our life should be easy. Because as it is written, for your sake, we are being put to death all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. What you're experiencing in this hardship, in this difficulty, is right along the line with what God's people have experienced all along. When you read, Hebrews 11, that roll call or that hall of fame of faith that goes through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses, it talks about Jericho, even some of the judges, and the prophets, and the kings. Hebrews, as much as it's saying that these men had great faith, these people had great faith, he also is relating their hardship and their difficulties as much as their faith. And the author puts that current generation right alongside them. And that means he's putting our generation right alongside them. He says in Hebrews 11, he says, others experienced the trial of mocking and scourging, yes, even chains and prison. They were stoned. They were sawed in two. That sounds pleasant, doesn't it? They were murdered with the sword. They went around in sheepskins and goatskins. They were destitute, afflicted, mistreated, and the world was not worthy of them. They wandered around in deserts and mountains, caves and holes in the ground. Does any of that change the outcome? It says, and all these, though commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised. They didn't see it with their own eyes. They didn't experience it, all those promises being fulfilled of all those great things, because God has provided something better for us. There is something better in our future than even if none of those things happen to that person or those people, even if they had all the health and the wealth and the prosperity and the power, if they had everything that this world could give to somebody, is it going to be better than what he has planned for us, that glory that is to be revealed? You had everything you could ever want in this world. It's not better than what he has got planned for us, the inheritance that he has for his people. By putting their current suffering alongside that of the patriarchs, the greats of the Tanakh, Hebrews, the author goes on to say something very important. He says, therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, we've seen this over and over and over again in the lives of the people, let us also get rid of every weight and entangling sin, let us run with endurance the race set before us, focusing on Yeshua, the initiator and perfecter, the author and the captain of our faith. For the joy set before him, everything about his life went peachy keen and smooth. Everything was a piece of cake. Right? Wrong. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and he has taken his seat because he was willing to do all of that. He's taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary in your souls and lose heart. He has the same goal that Paul did. You know, all that list of chapter 11, that great cloud of witnesses, he's trying to make the same point that Paul is making here in Romans. That despite being weak, being victims or out of power or dealing with false accusations or from a tyrannical government, we should know that in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. We are conquerors. We are victors, not because we are strong, but because he is strong. Not because we are good, but because, or better or more deserving, but because Messiah Yeshua fulfilled that role of going to the cross and resurrecting and defeating sin and death, because he overcame the world, the flesh, and the devil. So we can be assured that we are safe in his hands, and that our future inheritance, that place at the banquet table, is absolute and true. And so Paul says that he's convinced. And we should be convinced too. That neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Messiah Yeshua our Lord. And if we believe that, if we hold to that truth, we are far more prepared for the trials and tribulations that are going to come our way. We know that we can approach the throne of grace with confidence. We can, as Hebrews 10 talks about, continue to go through life, praying for the peace of the city that we live in, to live this life doing good, coming together at the synagogue despite all of the oppositions and threats. Let us, in spite of all of that, all of the difficulties and hardships, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and a body washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the unwavering confession of hope, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good deeds, even in the midst of the hardships and the difficulties and the fears. Should we still keep doing good deeds and loving one another and demonstrating that love to people who probably don't deserve it? Yeah. And do not neglect our own meetings, as some is in the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Y'all have heard me talk about this verse a lot, right? What's the special thing about this word, about that verse, verse 25? Do not neglect our own meetings. What's that word there? It's the episynagoge. It's the do not neglect the coming together at the synagogue. Do not forsake the synagogue. Even when all of the hardships are coming, even when they're saying you're not welcome here, even when they're saying that if you get counted with those Jewish people, if you're going to join up with them, well, then you're going to have to pay a higher tax. You're going to have to be subject to different laws and persecutions. You join up with those people, your life's going to get a lot harder. And he says, do not neglect, do not forsake. Even the synagogue. as is the habit of some, but encourage one another. And all the more we need to do those kind of things. All the more we need to hold fast the unwavering confession of hope. All the more we need to consider how to stir one another up to love and good deeds. All the more we need each other. Because I don't know about you, but I think we see the day approaching. Don't you? I see the day approaching. And so we need to hold fast to the truth that the victory is not in question. Amen?